Stacks with Paul and Steph.
Your go-to podcast for tech jabber.
On today's episode,
Interviewing our old manager.
Eve.
How do we meet, Eve?
At work.
Oh, really?
It was, I think, my third year at LinkedIn. I spent 2 years in the data org working on internal UI tools. And I switched to a new team, the Help Center team, referred by one of our common friends, Ewan. And after I joined, I think that was your second week. Stephanie, yeah, you joined the sprint before me, I think. So,
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. I remember
yeah.
waiting for you. They were like, oh, this Eve is going to join. I'm like, who's Eve? And no one told me your gender. So I was expecting a female. I was like, I have no idea what to expect. And then you popped on the scene. And I was like, oh, that guy hates me. Remember, I used to think I still do think everyone hates me.
And then fast forward a few years, I became a manager, and then we were in hyper growth, and we had to hire. I think it was during the pandemic. Yeah, the pandemic
Yeah.
just hit.
Just coming out of the pandemic, if I remember correctly.
Yes. And we had to grow the team really fast. We had like maybe 3 or 4 open headcount.
I just remember like around that time being like, it was weird to start completely remote. I had never done that before. And so that was awkward. And then just because of the whole like coming out of the pandemic, and it was just when things were starting to kind of open back up and offices were starting to be a thing again. And so it was like, what is that supposed to be? Like, is it we're going to like return to office or not? And so it's like a lot unknown.
I think the whole onboarding someone as remote was an interesting experience, both as a manager and as a coworker. Because I remember Paul asked this really simple question in Slack, and I gave him a very simple response. I think it was something about Git. And I
Yeah,
gave him
I
like the
remember.
most like, how do you not know this, you dumb dumb, in a nice way, right? And he took it such as I called him a dum dum when I didn't. He had the Stephanie effect. He's like, oh, she hates me.
I remember because I was like, or I had a bad rebase, and I was like, I can't remember. Like, I was completely blanking, and Steph was the only one online, and I was like, okay, I'll reach out to Steph. And she kind of gives me this one-line response where I was like, oh, I'm so stupid. Like, I already knew this.
So what motivated you to become a manager? I like to think it's me.
It was a combination of things. The main reason was boredom, uh, meaning I've been a UI engineer for a few years at that time. There's so many engineers. The scope of your work is very niche, right? You get to work on a small part. So there was no interesting or challenging projects for me to take on. I've been longing to do something different. I was thinking, oh, should I go full stack? Should I learn another language? And that was at my first annual review, and that's after I mentored you, Stephanie. So that was one of the big reasons why James thought I could actually be a great manager because I helped coach someone who was seemingly struggling until into someone very confident, and that's a superstar of the team. I say, hey, you could use those soft skills and help coach other engineers and build a team. So okay, well that sounds cool. And we just started from there, and there was always an understanding is that this is just for me to try out, and that I could always go back to IC, but also because the timeline of the projects as a manager are way longer. We're not talking about sprints or even quarters. We're talking about years, right? So James wanted to make sure that I spend at least 2 years as a manager so I get to experience the full life cycle of launching a project. So I've done that. And after the 2 year mark, as I know, I told him that I really wanted to go back to IC. And that transition back to IC took another year or so.
I remember when you became my manager. I remember the exact point of when it was like we always talked about it, like when you're in the process of becoming. And I remember as soon as you were like out of the program and you were officially a manager. Oh no, you were a supervisor. You remember that?
Yes, that HR bullshit. Oh, sorry. Can I say that in the podcast?
There's no HR here, it's fine. But no, I remember when you became a manager, James had talked to me, and it was almost like he couldn't transfer me to you fast enough. He was like, Eve is gonna manage you, okay? Are you okay with reporting to Eve? I was like, yeah. He's like, great. And then it was like if you ever thought James couldn't move fast, he moves so fast on the
For management wise, like or for the most part, like I only knew you as a manager, or at least in the beginning. So like to me, like I never saw anything besides that, and you always fit such like a great manager to me. Like, so what were the parts of it that like you actually did enjoy versus like what kind of pushed you to be like, never mind, like I don't really feel this is for me anymore.
It's a good question. I think the reason I enjoyed it was the same as James, like helping the people, taking care of the people. I before tech, my background was in HR, and I saw how HR of a company is there to protect the company from liabilities, right? Even though human is in the title, the job title, they don't help the humans. They
Right.
help the company, right? So I wanted to make a point that, okay, as a manager, I am here for the people. I'm not here for the company. I'm here for my
Mhm.
team. I'm here to grow them, and I'm here as a serving leader. I'm not someone that tells you what to do. I want to be someone there to help you achieve your goals. The friction, the overhead that comes from a big corporation like LinkedIn is the part that I didn't enjoy. As an engineer, I like to be efficient, productive. And, when you're this big, productive, efficiency is not something that you can get.
when you were in IC, we had what, like a 2 year working relationship before you became a manager. And I remember one of our first conversations, real conversations, was you pulled me into a meeting room and you told me everything that you hated about the way I work. Do you think that moment in time, um, you wanted to be a manager? Like if someone had asked you at that moment, like, hey, would you consider becoming a manager? Because that was like 2 years before you actually became it, right? So would you have said yes then?
No. I think going through the experience of coaching you and that we were still on speaking terms uh, convinced me that, okay, I might have something, even though I'm a huge introvert and it takes a lot of energy for me to have social interactions. Having this great, interaction and seeing you evolve and grow over the years really told me, hey, I could have this much impact on somebody else. Okay, it's going to take some effort out of me, right? But that, this is for the good of the team, right? So it was, some part of me knew that I was sacrificing a little bit of myself, but on the other part, it's like, okay, this is going to make my team, my job much better.
So just to add context, we all generally know the story, but when I first started on the team, I wasn't doing so good. I was just like disorganized in general. And then over the next 2 years, you kind of like gave me constant feedback of like, oh, you could have said this better or done this better. But then when you became a manager, I remember you tried to apply the same sort of process to other people, and it had varying success. Some people took it the right way, some people did not. But in general, do you think it was easier to have that influence on someone as an IC, or do you think you
Mhm.
had the same influence on people you're trying to help even as a manager? Like, do you think it would have been easier to do that job as a IC or a manager?
It's a really great question. I think it's easier as an IC because when a peer of yours helps you, you think you don't really think about if there's any ill intent. When it's coming from a manager, then you start thinking, is that a political game? Or what does he really want? Or you start to, uh, question their true intentions. And that comes with, the title of the manager, right? So helping you as a peer, as an IC, I think I can build trust much faster. As a manager, I was able to build trust with some of my direct reports. Really try to not lower myself, but just make me
Be on the
feel
same.
like I'm just one of the part of the team, right? I'm not here to supervise you. I'm here to help. Unfortunately, not everybody saw me. That person. There's some of them saw me as a manager, and that had all the power, and that they really had to listen to everything that I say, and then you know, don't take initiatives outside of the things that I told them to do, right? So
So our first conversation that I referenced earlier, where you essentially, we went to a meeting room. It was like off the cuff too. It was like we were walking and you're like, oh, come in here. I was like, okay. Had that whole experience gone negatively, you probably wouldn't have had like even thought about it. You probably been like, nah, not for me.
maybe in my previous team, I mentored two other junior engineers, effectively, I guess. So really depending, there was, a pattern, right? So maybe I would have mentored somebody else, in, the help center team. I don't know. But for sure, without you on the team, I think my experience as a manager would have been completely different.
So I also think when you became a manager, it was during a very interesting time period, right? Because you didn't like before the whole COVID thing, like people managed people in person and you were able to like, I don't know, I think in person you grow a relationship a lot faster, but you essentially had to grow all your relationships through Zoom meetings. Do you think that it would have been a better experience for you as a manager to have that interaction in person?
I think so. I think I became a manager, I think 2 weeks after the beginning of the pandemic. It was decided before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit. Um, I remember we were in the process of moving buildings. Pandemic hit, and then we had to, make do. We started blue jeans back then before Zoom
Oh,
became
that's
a big
right.
thing. Um, and yeah, essentially, we had to adapt really quickly. Nobody knew what a full remote work environment would be at LinkedIn. And yeah, it was really difficult to build those relationships because, I cannot chit chat with people on my way to lunch. I
Right.
cannot stop by the desk. Hey, that looks cool. What you doing? All those little one-off interactions that you have as part of your daily workday are not there. And pinging someone, I feel like it's kind of like an email or a notification, right? It's kind of like not rude, but it's taking you out of the flow. So I don't want to do that. Setting up a meeting just to chit chat feels so official.
When we were starting to work remotely and throughout the whole time, you had to like kind of ask permission to talk to someone. Like, hey Eve, can I talk to you right now? Or hey Paul, can I talk to you right now? Whereas if we were in person, I would just walk up to you and be like, hey, mind if I eat my bag of chips next to your desk?
I
Yeah.
think like Stephanie, I don't know if you remember, we had like movie days, we had things on E
Oh yeah.
days.
I mean, like
Uh,
the culture of the team before the pandemic was unique. Like there was like a permanent Halo station where you can walk up and play Halo anytime you want. And it was completely okay to just sit there and watch other people play Halo. Like usually it's like in the afternoon, like around 3 or 4, right? But it's like, you know, I think I think James fostered hanging out as normal,
Mhm.
right?
mhm.
It's like, oh, we're just gonna sit around and play Halo, or we're just gonna watch bad movies on this one day. So,
But
it was already unique, but you know, I
I
don't think I
also
saw it until after the pandemic when I more easily grew relationships over Slack. And then I was like, oh man, now I actually want to hang out with you guys in person.
I also feel like it fostered more productivity because like just because yeah, you're doing these like kind of informal things, because you had those relationships, you knew like who you could go talk to solve
Mhm.
certain problems.
Right.
And so like those walls weren't there. And so like you can get more creative or get things done faster because you knew who to talk to.
I think the people that were there pre-pandemic really, really cared. I mean, I'm not saying Paul cares any less. That's not what I'm implying. Sorry, Paul.
Gee, thanks.
No, but I'm just saying, like, the reason why we were so close as a team for a long time is because we hung out, we worked together every day for like 2 or 3 years in person. And then we went through a really rough transition of going remote, right? But it was more than just a work transition. It was like we all had little kids. Well, except for Eve. But Eve had little kids because he always had one-on-ones with me. So he kind of just like he knew the pains of like, oh, I have a one-on-one with Stephanie. Oh, she has a kid on her lap. Like he saw all of it, right? And I think because the good majority of the team were parents, it's like we just connected with each other a lot more. And people that weren't parents just saw like, oh, these are the challenges of like parenting and working from home. And as a whole, like the team just had a whole lot of like sympathy for each other, right? It was like we understood, but that kind of went away. I think even during your time as a manager, that sort of started going away, um, which probably is also what prompted you to become an IC again, too. Would you say?
Yes, yes. I became a manager because I truly believed in the culture of LinkedIn at the
Yeah.
time. Before becoming a manager, I always thought, oh, when I'm a manager, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to be so on point. I'm going to have all this structure and everything. I tried my best. I think I still had the structure. But what I was surprised to see not having is power.
The culture prior to the acquisition was very different. Like I was talking to Zach about this on the last day I was in the office. And it's like back then you can easily tie your emotions to your job and love your job. Like it was super easy to do that, right? Like the culture
Mhm.
was good, the people were good, there were a lot of fun events. I remember starting there and they would have like food truck Fridays when they would bring all the food trucks in, right? And they would do like more fun things on like the end days. But if you look at it now, it's not that company anymore, so you know I mean, I sort of understand where it's going, which is they're a business, right? They're not a playground. So they they're not in the same stage as they used to be. When they were growing, they needed people to want to work there. They had to attract that talent. But then now in the stage they're in, it's like it's not necessary for that appeal to be there anymore. You have essentially left the tech space now. and you've, gone on to your other adventures. Is there anything you miss about the tech space that, you're like, you know, I had some time. I had a year now, a year's break.
Mhm.
Is there any part of you that is like, man, I really miss this thing about working in tech?
I don't think that I had enough time to miss it yet. But I think that more than tech, what I hated about work is doing somebody else's job. Or like, I'm helping Microsoft getting richer. Or like I'm putting all this effort, but it's not really for me. Right. And now I have all the time in the world and I can do anything I want, but it's for me. It's for my own good, not for a corporation or somebody else.
Have that dilemma every single day I worked a job. It was like it was like when you listen to an earnings call and when you hear big numbers, right? You're like, man, or even not just the earnings call, when you complete a large project, right? And it's really successful and a lot of users are using it, you're like, man, why how can I do this for someone else, but yet I can't do it for myself, sort of feeling. And that just like eats away at me, man. Like now I'm building this thing and I'm just like, I've never been happier in my life.
Oh, there's something that I miss. And I don't know if that's something that you miss too, Stephanie. But weirdly, I miss deadlines. Or like, I kind of,
Mm, the
let me
structure.
expand. Structure, yes. So with a deadline, you have a certain date that you have to hit, right? And you prioritize your work around that date. Now that essentially my own boss, I decide to do what I want in whichever order. Well, there's no really priorities anymore, right? It's like up to what I feel like doing. And I feel like I don't have any structure anymore. It's like 1 minute I feel like, coding a little bit. And the next minute I'm gonna draw or I'm gonna paint. Uh, and those small activities all spark joy to me, but there's no like a main project or a main priority that I can stick to. That's the current struggle that I find myself in a lot, and deadlines would help a lot with it.
Yeah. I actually said something on Twitter. Um of I think it was last week, which is like I have no routine for myself. Like I need to find that routine because I feel like everything I do is not important towards like whatever my goal is, right? So it's like I made a very you'd be so proud of me, Eve. I made a very rigid schedule of like, okay, what are my priorities? And everything I do should align to those priorities. I made like a spreadsheet where it's like, okay, during these hours, I'm gonna do this. During these hours, I'm gonna do that. And my two priorities was build something, hang out with my kids. So it's like, all right, in the morning, when my kids are slow moving, I'm gonna be building things. And in the afternoon, when they have some energy and they want to get out of the house, I'm gonna go hang out with them. And then, I do whatever after they go to bed. But even then, it's still hard because when you're working for a company, you know that someone has validated what you're building is necessary. But then when you've left the company and you have to do something on your own, you're like, is this really important or is it just something I enjoy doing?
When it comes to work, okay, those what or these things need to be done. And side projects, like I'm like, oh, I kind of want to work on this one, but I kind of want to work on that one. And so like I have so many like different little things going on where I'm like, which one do I pick? And so then I end up doing nothing because I'm like, I get like so distracted by the choices that I'm just like, okay, can someone just tell me which one to choose? So one question I would have is, so like, what did like being an IC teach you versus like what management taught you about yourself? And like then the transition out, like what did you learn from that?
That's a good question.
Wow. Okay. What being an
Introspection.
IC and a manager taught me about myself. I'm gonna start with manager, I think, because I think that's where I learned the most. Um, I ended up turning down the role of the manager. Oh, I've done it for 2 years and I stepped down to being a staff because the role of the manager didn't really fit me.
Mhm.
Um, I was a huge introvert and spending my day in meetings, even though I cared about each one of the engineers I worked with, was really draining. So that's one of the main thing that I learned about myself. So in small dose, short term, I can force myself to be social all day, every day. I cannot do that long term. It's going to lead to burnout. That's one thing. Also, I need to take more vacation or take care of myself. Somewhere in my brain, it's like, okay, if I work harder or if I'm more present or if I have more one-on-ones, I'll be better, right? But this is actually counterproductive. Taking a breather, stopping your work for a little while, it's actually better long term, right? Catching your breath. So yeah, I think the role of the manager really taught me about what I need to do to be happy, and what where I draw the line for my mental health. As an IC, I think the work it's less draining. It's more draining physically because you have to do more work, but I don't have to think about the decisions or the political games that are happening, or who do I need to talk to so that they can give me the piece that I need for this project, or turn the yes. So it's a lot of games in getting your project prioritized, and so that's the part I don't miss, right? So as an IC, you get assigned a project, you know clearly what your role is, and then now your job is to execute. Okay, that's fine. The problem then is now you deal with others, people's decision that might not make sense to you, right? So the struggle is like, okay, can I do a job with decisions that I don't believe in, right? That's really like, so being an IC, I think as a junior IC, you're just happy to do whatever, right? So you're doing buttons in there, and you get paid for it. Great. But
Yeah.
as you grow more and more, and you've done that multiple times, at some point you're like, okay, well, is it worth my time?
I never took time off, like rarely, right? It was like usually someone would have to ask me to take time off. Like, oh, if you want to do that, like take a day off. But then, I think as the situation evolved, it was like you really feel it on yourself, like, oh, I can't run this marathon anymore. Right. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I need to step out for like, essentially grab a drink and take a little break and then come back refreshed. I would argue that you love your job the most when you feel like you can just always keep going, right? Because the reason why we never really took time off before is because we enjoyed what we did and it didn't feel like work, right? Like
What's something you tried as a manager that totally flopped?
managing me.
I
Just kidding. You did a great job managing.
I think there's a lot of things I've tried and that flopped. Too many to count.
I mean, like VCA was the greatest successful pivot that team has done. It was like ChatGPT came out and Jay was like, oh, we got to use this thing. And I still remember the first document we ever wrote about VCA was it didn't have any sentences in it, just little keywords, probably less than 100 words on that page. And then me and Paul thought, yep, this is a great plan. Let's go. I think one of the successes you had as a manager was you actually implemented like some sort of like guideline around the Jira ticket so that, the person reading your Jira ticket isn't sorely disappointed with like a lack of description, right?
Yeah, I personally don't think that's necessary. I felt like that falls under the common sense area, but
I remember like at some point being like, oh, there would just be like a title and there'd be nothing in the description. I'd be like, what's this supposed to achieve? Or like the description would be like, do what the title says. I'm like, this is not how we're supposed to have requirements. Like requirements are supposed to be like user stories. Like, how are we supposed to build off of this?
Is there some part of you that is seeking that sort of process of like, oh, I want to be able to correlate something to a ticket and I want to be able to add descriptions and maybe even do story points or whatever.
Yes, I think I really thrive on structure, and I need a place to offload all my ideas. If they live in my brain, I feel like, there's too many things floating around and it's a little bit overwhelming. So, you know, dumping them into right tickets or even a backlog, but they're safe, right? I can go back to them at some point. That's something that I really want, but I also acknowledge that some part of me also wants to over-engineer my workflow and all my processes, and this is definitely part of it.
See, I remember back in the day, we used to be like, oh, our backlog is too big. But in retrospect, it's actually not a bad thing, right? Because you're just dumping your brain. You're not saying I'm going to do everything in here, but I don't want to forget about it, right? And as long as it's in the backlog, you won't forget as long as you review the backlog every so often.
Right. And if it's really important, it's going to make it out of the backlog.
It reminds me of the four quadrants thing, the very important, what was it? Very important, high impact, uh,
Uh,
not important, high impact. I forgot what the quadrants were. You know what I'm talking.
Costly, high impact, cheap, high impact, costly, low impact, costly, high impact, low impact. Did I go through all four?
Yeah.
There was usually only one quadrant that is super important, and then the rest you kind of like you're like, okay, we can do that once we get past these things, right? Um, but yeah, now I don't try. I stopped trying to replicate the work process. I don't use a task management. I throw everything on a Google Calendar and I call it a day. What would you tell people making those transitions? Like, is there any like thing that you can point to and be like, just be aware that this sort of feeling, emotion thing can come up and be prepared for it?
All right, so transitioning from IC to manager. I think the biggest lesson for me was finding value out of my role in my work. As an IC, it's really clear what your output is, right? It's code, it's projects. As a manager, it's way less tangible, right? It's growing people, or it's also projects, but we're talking about years now, right? So you don't really see a true output. And, having been an engineer for several years before that, it was a big struggle for me. Like, I like to let my work speak for itself. But after I became a manager, I wasn't sure what my work is anymore. Right. So really getting this new mindset, okay, I'm growing the people. It's not about me and my output, it's about their outputs. Right. So that took me a few months to realize. Then from manager to IC, I think it was about, so as a manager, I saw the whole process in terms of how do you build requirements or launch a project, right? And all the work that goes into it to make sure that the work of the engineers is streamlined and as unambiguous as possible. As an IC, then, when I got ambiguous tasks and projects, I would get very frustrated because I know that, this is out of my control and this is what the mess I'm inheriting right now, right? So I was recognizing more into my projects what people were lacking to do in other aspects, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, what are some of the gotchas that you would warn people about going in the manager direction or going back to the IC direction, or even being up leveled, like between those two things, right?
Hmm. Going to manager is to really think about why you want to become a manager. I think a lot of people do it because that's the easier ladder to climb and getting more money. And definitely you get more money, right? But the work is completely different from what you do as an IC, right? So if you're gonna be unhappy and you're gonna be suffering for many years, that's not worth it. The money is not worth it. Gotchas, um, from stepping back as an IC, for me, I was a senior engineer, then I became a manager, and then I got a lateral move to staff, right? So I wasn't promoted from senior to staff. For me, that came a lot with a lot of imposter syndrome, or wondering if I was worthy. And I think I put a lot more pressure on myself because of that. I think that everybody's situation is going to be very different, but doing the work, a job that I wasn't really promoted into, was really challenging for me.
Do you think that the imposter syndrome you felt as a staff could have contributed to you leaving tech for a bit?
I think it contributed to it, but it that by itself wasn't enough to get me out of tech. There was a lot of things, and I just didn't have the enough headspace to handle all of it, right? So I don't think I can pinpoint to a single thing, but this is was definitely part of the thing that pushed me out.
And if someone was in the same position where they were a senior and then a manager and then staff, would you advise them to go to the staff role, or would you say, hey, you probably be better off going back to a senior role and getting promoted?
I think it really depends on the situation, but the way that our org treated staff engineers, I would say that you'll have chances of success as a senior engineer.
Yeah, I think I told this to Paul last time we were recording, but one thing I realized after the whole LinkedIn thing is that the title doesn't actually matter, because at the end of the day, it's like I'm no longer with the company and no one is ever gonna care about what title I held there or, anything. And like I think one of the biggest struggles I have is like I don't feel like the accomplishments I did at LinkedIn are mine anymore, right? Because it's not my intellectual property anymore, right? So it's like even when even when I'm like talking to people about stuff I've done, I always hesitate to even mention LinkedIn because I have this disconnect of like, oh, it's not my work anymore. Like, they bought it from me when they paid me a salary. I do have this vision. Like, I was never a big game person, right? I feel like if I had to have a company around anything, I would love to build games. I've had so much fun. I was thinking the other day, I was like, I would love to build games. Like if it could be successful, I would love to build games that just help people learn like technical things, but in a more fun way. Like that would be so much fun,
Mhm.
right? Like it's kind of like I finally found meaning to what I want to do. It's like, oh, at the end of the day, you just want to build a game. Like anyone can do that. All right, so to wrap this up, I think I said that last time too, but to actually wrap this up, what is next for you, Eve?
I am going to continue taking art classes. It's been a year since I stopped coding, and we've decided that my sabbatical will be indefinite at this point. So I'm just going to continue learning until I feel like doing something else. How about you?
Paul, what about you?
Okay, punted, sure. For now, I am still going to be coding for a while. But realistically, I am also kind of thinking I might be leaving engineering. I think I've kind of gotten bored with it. And I'm actually kind of, I think I have a lot of passion for the user experience. And I'm kind of wanting to think about maybe going to product and seeing what I can do feature wise and coming up with solutions. And I feel like having a technical background would probably help me there. So maybe it's time to start thinking about some sort of change.
So for me, I'm just going to, right now, my plan is to take at least the summer, if not more, to build my own things. And I also have a freelance project starting in July. So it's not all going to be game building, but I'm building an app for a company and it's going to be on my own terms. So I actually started a formal company and I'm just like, okay, this has to either be successful or flop before October because I don't want to pay the California tax. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know right now if I'm gonna try to join another company right away. It's possible in the future, but not right now. I haven't. I've been having too much fun doing my own thing, to be honest.
Thank you for joining us today, Eve.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Eve. Bye bye.